Welcome back to Lush Life, No Labels, a podcast where I talk about the struggles and joys of self improvement, anywhere from relationships, career, wellness, and more. I'm Fatu. I have a special guest joining me on this week's episode of the pod this week. Guest, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name's Allan. I am 41 years old and I live in Miami, Florida. It is actually beautiful right now. I am in my apartment on the 51st floor, looking over the city and facing South Beach and the water. And it is absolutely phenomenal.
I love that for you. I live in the Northeast and it's cold over here.
Oh no.
But thank you for joining me on today's podcast. I typically start these episodes with a story of the week. Do you have any stories you'd like to share with our audience today?
My week was a little crazy. I am actually in sales. I am in the research and development tax credit consultant. So I sell our service to businesses that invest in research and development to help them find those credits end of the month. So, you're only as good as your last month. I didn't end where I wanted to, but it was very hectic and I put all my maximum strength. So that's kind of all I was going on in my life last
Mhm.
week. So I definitely took time to reflect on what I can do to be better next month. And our fiscal ends in June. So I'm gonna do everything I can to end well. I'm trying to get a paid vacation for me and my partner to Lisbon. So I'll be focusing on that the next few months.
That's awesome. Lisbon
Yeah.
is a beautiful place for sure.
Yeah, I have been, but I've never been on somebody else's dime, so that would be nice.
It's probably sweeter. Thanks for sharing about your week. You mentioned that you work around tax credits. As
Yeah.
tax season in the US, of course, just ended on April 15th. So if you haven't yet done your taxes, you should probably go over and do that. I'm glad you brought up taxes because that's actually a good transition into our topic this week, especially given your background and where you work. I think it's definitely a good chance for us to talk about the economy. A lot of people in this country are thinking about the economy and what's been going on in the last 4 months and how the future looks. For sure, I'm sure a lot of your clients are also thinking about that. You work with clients who are in research and development. Has it impacted the work that you do or the clients that you have?
Obviously, the research and development that the executive order has shut down has been in government funded. So I work in the private sector. So businesses are doing their own research and development to create pharmaceutical. It could be in engineering. It could be in inventions. One of the clients that I do target a lot in Miami is the manufacturing sector for the research and development tax credit. If they are improving their manufacturing processes, or it could be expanding new machinery, it's considered R&D when they're investing and being able to produce something new or better their process. I have been speaking to a lot of manufacturing companies, and they are a little, this is Florida, these people are, not to get into politics, these people are Republican.
Hmm.
But I had a client who he's actually into lobbying. He goes to DC, but he manufactures different metal materials. It could be staircases, windows. The conversations of the tariffs came up, and he's like, well, right now it hasn't affected me. He is a Republican, but not excited with what's going on with Trump. And I do understand where the president is standing and trying to bring jobs back.
I was going to ask if a lot of his business is based in the US.
So this client in particular, he's a US based manufacturer in Miami.
Mm,
However, he does get materials like steel from overseas.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So right now he's a little freaked out, but he's like, the good thing about I have been running this business with high margins. He does do really well, so he's not going to change his price. The clients that I've been speaking to are bracing themselves
Mm-hmm.
for impact almost. And they're trying to buy currently the surplus of materials that they may need. So that's higher expenses. And they're looking at different avenues where they can get some money back. That's kind of where I come in. Here
Mm-hmm.
we are.
Here we
Um,
are. Before we had the tariffs, a lot of people have talked about inflation. And during the inflation times, we were seeing reports of course, people are getting a little nervous, businesses, other people, eggs are $10. With the introduction of these tariffs, do you think inflation has, I guess I don't hear people talk about inflation as much now because we're focusing so much on these tariffs. Do you think the combination of both of those things contributing to how these businesses are
absolutely. Like
Mhm.
people are realizing that things are more expensive. And listen, I'm in sales, and for me, I don't have a cap on how much money I can make. I'm in the position that I'm like, okay, things are getting expensive. That means you need to work harder. You need to make more money.
Mhm.
I'm lucky and fortunate enough that I have a situation like that where a lot of people don't have that. You know what I mean? And it's like it's a fixed income.
Yep.
I was talking to my best friend. She's bought some houses. She does very well for herself. She was making great money before the pandemic, basically.
Mhm.
After the pandemic, she stayed at a standstill. She's actually been at her place of employment 19 years,
Okay.
and she has not left. She has not had a raise since 2020.
Five
Yeah,
years.
yeah. She's like,
Mhm.
I've given this company so much of my time and I've been here so long. It's just, this is how much their budget allocates for my salary. And
Mhm.
I flat out told her, I go, I get where she comes from. We've known each other since middle school. I was in banking for a very long time. I was with JP Morgan Chase for over 14 years. And I get that. I get the loyalty. It was actually my first job. And I come from a different generation. I saw my parents. They're the type of people that stay at a job forever. And
Mhm.
I guess that's kind of where I came from and why I stayed so long at that company. Once I switched and I was offered more money and then I switched again. At the end of the day, these companies, they can replace you from one day to the next. They have to figure
Mhm.
it out. You're not an owner. You're not a business owner. You put in your time and you are not learning. You are not growing. You are
Mhm.
not making more money. You just gotta switch. And that's kind of where I stood. The pandemic was going on and I'm like, I'm working harder and not making as much money. It's time for me to make more money somewhere else. And I was able to increase my base salary, I think almost $80,000 during the 2020. I always make sure to stay at least a year. I don't jump around and I try to make it work. I was at a hedge fund for about just over a year and realized, okay, it's not for me. Research and development consultancy firm reached out to me, no idea what it was, and I said, hey, I can sell free money, that sounds great. Was there for a bit. I was an executive director there, and then my other company, who's a major Fortune 500 company, reached out to me, and I said, yes, I've been there now over a year and I've been doing great. I'm very lucky that I am in sales. And when I started seeing things and prices go up, I'm
Mhm.
like, hey, you got to move up because you got to make more money. I always put money into my savings. I always have long term goals, short term goals. I want to be able to
Mhm.
do things if I want to do it. If I want to buy something, I want to buy something. And inflation was definitely a big factor into my decisions on moving into new companies. Where I was at, we're not moving the needle. Going back to that little story about my friend, I was like, listen, you got to wake up, girl. 5 years and you haven't done anything. And I know you're doing well. It's time for you to move on. And I get you've been there for 19 years, but somebody with her education, with her experience could definitely get something like that. If you see things going up, you got to do something to make more money and you got to figure it out.
Yeah, and you mentioned the job hopping piece. It's something that I've talked about a few times on this podcast because that is even people that I know in business as well, that's the advice that they give these days. The
Yeah.
value is job hopping. These days the value is not let me stay at this company. Like you were saying, like your parents' generation as well, let me stay at this company my entire time and then I will get those rewards. That's not the case anymore. And one of the
Mm-mm.
other issues too that's going on is we had the stock market crash in 2008, which
Mhm.
obviously led to a lot of other setbacks and challenges for people. And then now we're also at this current time of economic uncertainty. And I definitely want to hear some of your thoughts on that. If there are any similarities between what happened in 2008 and what's going on now. Like you said, the pandemic happened, that has changed the world in general. So there are some of those differences. But are there maybe one or two things that you think are similar between then and now?
In 2008, I was 23, 24. I already had my master's and I had been in banking at this point. 'Cause I was working full time and going to school full time. I was just like, I need to make money and nobody's going to pay my bills. So I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
do this. And I was making really good money from the beginning. Before the crash of 2008, there had been a lot of loosening of regulatory lending. You had a credit score of a 720, you could say, hey, I make $1 million a year, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody would check your finances. They would say, okay, basically a kind of like a no doc loan where they would just give you the loan based on your credit score and your work history. They're just giving it out to everybody. Well,
They're being a little too generous.
they're being too generous, and things like 100% financing, where you would take a line of credit and then 80% was your regular mortgage. At this point, I'm very young in my banking world. To me, it was like the faucet of money. It was never closed. I was sitting on top of the world, and then the crash happened. And I remember I was saving money, but I was also burning money really, really quickly. I
Mhm.
was young, and I'm like, well, I got my job, I'm doing great. I have not gone through any sort of financial issues. I had purchased a few properties by that point. All my friends were doing it. It went from like $24,000, $25,000 a month in commission to not even $600. Let me tell you, that
Yeah.
was a freaking wake up call. Luckily, I did put money into savings and I was not in as bad a situation as a lot of my peers were. They were all filing for bankruptcy because
Hmm.
they could not keep up with their payments on their cars and their homes.
Yeah.
The good thing is that my parents always taught me don't live beyond your means.
Hmm.
And I definitely was putting a lot of money into my savings account. Similarities to now and then, 2008 is still very fresh for at least people in my age. And
Hmm.
now people back then are now making really good money for, it's a lot of time, a lot more experience. A lot of people learned a lot of lessons
Yes.
and save a lot more because you really have no idea. The last time we had some huge thing like that was in the 80s. It was
Hmm.
1980, 1979, 1981, where there was a huge recession. People kind of forgot about that whole thing, and the whole dot com and all this
Yeah.
money just kind of going everywhere, and the economy was doing great, and everybody could buy a house. Now people are more conscientious because of what happened, and again, it's a different situation. i
Yeah.
don't think i don't think people are getting into homes they can't afford anymore, or get into things that they can't afford anymore. I think the tariffs is just going to make everything more expensive, so the economy is going to change differently because there's not going to be as much spending. It's a different type of animal. It's not like I bought an $800,000 house and I'm not going to be able to afford it. It's more like I'm not going to be able to go out, or I'm not going to be able to buy that shirt, or I'm not being able to buy that car. How bad are things going to get? We
That
don't know until we
remains.
get there. I was pretty oblivious in 2008 when we're going to make this ridiculous change. What do you mean nobody's getting a mortgage from us? What do you mean nobody's getting a line of credit? What do you mean nobody's bringing us deposits?
Yeah, and one of the things that you're highlighting here is that the banks were at the center of what happened in 2008,
Yeah.
right? It was a completely different thing. And we've been dealing with inflation a lot, like you mentioned. People haven't been spending as much in the last few years. I was reading about even retail. A lot of these quarterly reports are coming back as they're not meeting the standard that they had initially put, or not meeting their goals. It's certainly a different beast, especially after the pandemic. Everything is different. But to your point, there are lessons to be learned with people who've gone through that. Now it's a new generation where Gen Z is going to have to go through whatever we're going to face in the future. So
Yeah.
the economy does shape us all, like you mentioned, from when you had first graduated to now. There are things that you've learned, but it's something that people are still going to be impacted by.
Mm-hmm.
So it does track, right? The economy is a cycle, it does go up and down, but don't know that anyone really knows where we're going. We're just all here in
Yeah.
uncertainty trying to figure it out.
My advice being that I did go through 2008 and we were hearing whispers of things going on. This is the time right now. Like right now, these are the whispers, these are like the uncertainties. This is where you really start. Do I really need to order that Uber Eats? Do I really need to go on that trip? Do I really need to, you know what I mean? Start putting that money aside
Hmm.
if you have it now, just because we don't know what's gonna situation's gonna be like in 6 months. We don't know if
And
do
that has
that.
already started happening.
Yeah, exactly. Start putting your money away. If you save $100 a month, try saving $150 a month. I mean, obviously, I don't know what everybody's budget is, but I know my budget, and I know I'm definitely putting a lot more money aside just in case. And if
Yes.
you know what, if nothing happens, fantastic. I have a little
Yeah,
nest
then you have a little.
egg.
Exactly. Better safe than sorry, for
Yeah,
sure. You've talked about saving money. It's something that you have done. You talked about how your parents said don't live beyond your means. And all of those sound like building yourself and also building your wealth. When you think about your success, and you've had a lot of success, and obviously you're going to continue to have more success, when you've thought about that, has your definition of success changed over time?
Yeah, definitely. When I was younger, success was owning property. Success
Hmm.
was having a nice car. Success was,
A lot of material
it
items.
was a lot of material items, and those things were shaping me as I had obviously never made money like that before. And the more that I dealt with more affluent, more clients, I realize that that's not what wealth is. Wealth is money in the bank is really what wealth
Hmm.
is at the end of the day. It's like how much money do you have in the bank so that if something does happen, you're okay.
Or when you
Because
retire, you have a nest egg.
yeah, don't rack up your credit card. Don't
In
don't
America, I would argue that debt is encouraged. I do think some folks go into debt not because they're just trying to necessarily live a certain lifestyle, but more that they unfortunately are crumbling under our capitalistic society. But
yeah,
to
yeah,
your
I
point, if you
was
can save, if you can do these things, yes, you should be doing it.
Yeah, I think if you don't fall into the allurement of getting a big credit card and saying, every
I don't
time
have a limit on this
I
card.
don't have a limit on this card, or I have a $15,000 limit on this credit card, and your friend says, "Hey, let's go here, trip to wherever," and it's like, you know what, I really can't afford it, but I could put it on my credit card and pay it off over time. I was watching Bloomberg. The debt of each generation has been exponentially climbing to some crazy numbers,
Hmm.
from 30,000 to 80,000 to $90,000 in credit card debt. And they're saying it's because inflation has increased so much and people want to live their life and they want to go on trips, and the world of social media has completely changed
Hmm.
what people's perception is. And it's like you see people going to the Maldives and going to this to Coachella and going to this other event,
Oh,
and people want to
actually, okay, fun Coachella story. I always knew that Coachella was for rich people, obviously, but apparently this year, more than 80% of the attendees are on
finance it.
Afterpay. Yeah, it's like
Yeah, finance it.
layaway. Like
Yeah,
it's
I'm gonna
crazy how much people are willing to do that for a concert, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll tell you, I went to Coachella not last year, but the year before. I did get VIP, which I probably didn't have to do that. That was $1,300, but at my age, I do not want to be going into border potties. So it was very worth. But the ticket, the flight, the Airbnb that we got, the car rental, I think it
Hmm.
was all between in and food and so forth. And I think we were still frugal because we like packed some of our lunches and things of that nature. We heard that the food was ridiculous. I think at the time when we went, a taco was $25. I heard it got even worse this year.
Hmm.
So we packed sandwiches and chips and things of that nature in our bags, and we were totally fine. It was perfect.
Hmm.
Between each of us, it was between maybe $4,000 and $5,000 each. That place is making some money, and it brings a lot of money to
They are.
that
And
area.
yeah.
But I mean, if I had to put all that on a credit card or something like that to go, let me tell you guys, it's not worth it. Like
Hmm. Especially
you
currently,
don't need to
it's not
be
worth it.
yeah, you don't need to be saving up $10,000 for a 3-day event, guys. Like you just gotta evaluate
And
of
you're
people
someone
that
who can afford it. Yeah.
and I'm someone that can afford it. But
So,
if you're, I mean, who knows? There's people out in Miami like making half a million, a million, $2 million, and they're younger than me. I get that. I get that. But if
but the
you're
fact
not
that
in that,
most of the people are putting it on,
yeah,
I think that just goes to show you that if you have the money for it, that's one thing. But if you don't and you have to put it on a
a
payment
credit card,
plan, that's
yeah,
where the problem comes in. And
yeah,
you mentioned that your definition of success, right? I think that's what we were talking about. Like
yeah.
that has shifted from wanting certain things to now there's other things that are more important to you.
I'm 41. What I think being more financially sound is having more money in
Hmm.
your bank account and having more money in your retirement accounts and increasing that percentage that goes into your 401k or
Yeah.
putting more money into a set aside. That really is my definition of success because when I do retire, I do not want to be counting on Social Security or anything like that because who
Well,
knows
all
what's
of
going to
that is in
happen.
danger now
Yeah,
anyway. So,
who knows where that is going to be going to. And I want to make sure that I'm going to be living a comfortable lifestyle and that
hmm.
I'm not going to be working till I'm 70 or 80 years old because that's the last thing I want.
Or working until
Um,
you're dead, which happens to a lot of people in this
yeah,
country.
I want to be
Yeah.
able to relax and have a good living situation and know that I'm not going to die and run out of money.
Yeah. And so
So
you
that
no,
is
I
my
think that's a great
definition.
point, right? And
That's my definition of success.
yeah, and even a lot of on Reddit, for example, there are all of these subreddits where people talk about fire, sort of trying to retire early or trying to have, like you said, a good nest egg so that you don't have to worry about certain things as one as we age, but also just in general when we retire or at least have the chance to retire. And, obviously saving money, not living over your means. You said that your parents taught you that. And I find that a lot of us may not have some of that guidance, may not have, maybe we didn't, for example, I didn't grow up in a household where, like, my parents didn't have money.
Hmm.
They never invested. That just wasn't a thing. One, they couldn't save money because they made barely to scrape by, I guess.
Yeah,
But if they did, it would be gone because they have to pay a bill or whatever it may be. So I guess my
yeah.
question is for people who didn't grow up with that type of guidance or even just didn't grow up with
I
the
yeah,
exposure to people who know how to invest or know things like that, where do you think they can start
my
early?
advice to that population
Hmm.
and honestly to every single person, whatever financial situation, whatever background you come from, if you're
Hmm.
somebody that does come from a lot of money or you're somebody who had parents that were living paycheck to paycheck, my advice to everybody, once you start your job at whatever level, even if it's flipping burgers or your first sales job or your
Hmm.
consultant job, walk into your bank and ask to speak to a financial advisor.
Okay.
I think that is the best thing that you can do because they can really sit down with you and tell you, all right, what is your short term goal? What is your long term goal? How much money would you like to retire with? What kind of lifestyle would you like to live when you retire?
Hmm.
And they can help you structure. Like I always give the advice of, if I want to say 50 20 like 50% of your paycheck should go to your expenses of living between home, food, whatever. 20% goes to your expenditures. You need to live your life if you want to go out to dinner or whatever. And then 10% of that going into your savings account. You want to make sure that you have at least 3 to 6 months of full expenditures saved up in some sort of liquid account. And once you go beyond that, start putting more money into your retirement. I know that because I've sat down with financial advisors and they've helped me go into how much you should be saving and how much you should but I think everyone should. And it's those little things that you have a goal
Hmm.
of where I should be putting my money, how much I should be putting my money, because you could be saving too much money in the sense that you're like so
Yeah.
strapped. You're so strapped for cash because you're like, I need to put all this money into my savings account, but you're not living. You know what I mean? You're not
Yes, that's a
enjoying
really great call out. That there
your
is, yeah, there's sometimes too much of anything is bad. Yeah,
yeah.
you
I
shouldn't
think
be
I
struggling because you're over saving as well.
Yeah, like, if you have $30,000 in your liquid savings account and a good hefty retirement account, and you're like, no, I can't do that, you're not living. You need to find that balance. Everyone should sit down with a financial advisor. A scenario is like if you start putting $5,000 from the age of 28, for example, into a Roth IRA every year, by the time you retire, you'll have over $1 million in that account. And that's not all other retirements like your 401ks and whatever the case is. So it's just one of
Yes.
those, like, you won't know that until you sit down with your financial advisors. You can figure out something that's good for you, and you can go in there and start something, a small account that you're contributing something. The earlier the better because of that compound interest.
Hmm.
I was listening to a financial advisor's podcast, and it's like, if you have kids and if you have a company and you hire your kid and you put a maximum amount into a Roth IRA, and that's their payment. Like, if you hired them as a parent, I don't have kids, but it's a phenomenal idea. I wish my parents would have done something like this. By the time they retire, they'll have over $10 million. Even if you're contributing the 7,000, I think right now it's 7,500 that you could contribute until the age of 18, and you just left that money alone and not touched it. Don't quote me on this. I think that's how it was. Just on that money alone, by the time they retire, they'll have over $10 million in retirement,
Wow.
which is crazy to me. So the point of it, sit down with a financial advisor as quickly as you can. Don't walk, run, especially in this economy that we're going to be running into. If you
Hmm.
have kids, figure out what you can do to put money aside for your kids. They're going to love you, and that's not a lot of money that you're putting aside every year
Yeah,
for your kid, that if something happens, they're going to be taken care of.
that's a
I
great
think
point.
that's my advice to everybody. Also, put as much and work as hard as you can. Don't get lazy in your 20s and 30s, because that's going to set you up for your future, that you can still get paid well and not have to stress so much, or you had the energy. What I was doing in my 20s, I can't do now. That is
Hmm.
for sure.
Thirst for
Huh?
curiosity as well at that point that you can build into something.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely have a lot more energy when you're younger, so work hard.
Hmm.
As you get older, it just starts getting a lot harder.
Yeah, those are, yeah. Thank you for that advice. I think those are both really great points. And to your point on the financial advisor, yeah, you could be making any type of money, and it certainly helps to go see them. And
Yeah.
for people who, I know obviously the more money you make, you start paying for specific advisors and financial planners, which is one thing. But if people are looking for even free resources, your local library certainly has some of those types of options out there. If you check out their website, there's also websites online where you can start with. They can pair you with a financial advisor. So it doesn't hurt to check these things out because, like Alan said, we are in another time of economic uncertainty. So it's good to get your ducks in order and just make sure that you have a plan. And as time goes on, maybe you'll change your goals, which is completely fine. But as you change those goals, then you can adjust what you want to do and how you invest your money. You've given us a lot to think about today and a lot of really great points around finance, planning for our future, and the economy. We're a few months away from the second half of the year. Do you have any other sort of economic goals for the rest of this year that you'd like to share?
For me, it kind of comes hand in hand with work. I'm playing for that trip to Lisbon,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, that's valid.
be
People are nervous overall about the economy, but it's certainly, we'll get through it, right? These things are
yeah.
cyclical, so in the end, we all know that we will get through it. So thank you again, Alan, for being on today's podcast. As we wrap up, is there anything you want the audience to think about?
If you get anything out of this conversation that we had, one, your goal should be for before the end of the year, maybe before summer starts, go talk to a financial advisor. Two, Set goals. Set goals. Everyone should set goals every day, every month, every year on what they want to do and what they want to accomplish, regardless if it's financial, if it's personal, I don't know, love interest, whatever it might be.
Hmm.
Write those goals down and look at them. Give yourself a set time when you want to meet those goals because that's the only way you're going to move forward.
Great. Thanks again for being a guest on Lush Life No Labels. To my listeners, like and subscribe to Lush Life No Labels on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Follow me on Instagram. Cheers to your lush life and see you later.
Alrighty.
Bye.
Thank you for having me. All
Of
right, bye.
course.